Hello, everyone, and welcome to Top Performance Features in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Looking forward to going over some of these features with you. My name is Angus Hudson, and I'm coming to you today from our downtown Vancouver office. I have the privilege in working in the city that is not raining today, which is great news. But if you're a customer of Javelin, you're probably familiar with the fact that we are the #1 reseller in Canada. And what that means to you is that we have offices all across the country. So when you call our support, you're able to take advantage of every single time zone, and you get to talk to people in new and exciting places. So to kick this off, let's first talk about the user interface, because in all honesty, it's the thing that you pay the most attention to in SOLIDWORKS, I find. It's what affects everything that you do in the software. So the better it performs, the better we perform. In SOLIDWORKS 2020, we've had a couple of really nice enhancements to this to speed up things like our daily interactions that we do time and time again. One of them is the open dialogue has now been significantly improved to make it easier to use. But it is also able to better take advantage of some of the new functionality in SOLIDWORKS 2020 for performance that we're going to be talking about. Another really cool enhancement that was a big user request and is something that I'm really excited about is the new option to search your materials. In the past, if you had something assigned to your favorites list for materials, it could be very quick to add it. But if it wasn't, you often had to dig through the whole materials dialog to find the correct one. And this could be a bit monotonous, whereas the new search allows you to get right to that material very, very quickly. So taking a look at the open dialog here, we can see that the list of different extensions that SOLIDWORKS is able to open is now quite a bit wider and it's better organized. We also are able to take advantage of these new sliders to choose what kind of mode we want to be opening our parts in. This is one of the very cool things. By putting this front and center, it's now going to be much easier for us to remember to use these modes. I know I was often at fault for just forgetting, whereas I'm excited that this is now here because it's going to encourage me to use them in the correct situations. We also now are able to select these materials with a search, as I said. So it's exactly the same process. You just right click, you say edit material, and then you can just start typing into that search bar at the top of the list. This is really cool because if you have custom materials in there, it's going to pull those out. In this case, where we have titanium alloys and then other metals, those would have been separated. So it wouldn't have been quick for us to just go through and click on each one and figure out which one had the correct properties for what we wanted if we didn't know just by looking at the name. Now that we're able to search, these are going to be right next to each other in our view, so we're not going to be scrolling back and forth between them. So this is a really nice, convenient way for us to now be selecting materials faster than before. Large assembly performance has been a significant goal for SOLIDWORKS over the past several years. And as a result, we've seen some big enhancements for this. So I'm thinking assembly visualization from a couple of years ago. I'm thinking about the improved graphics performance that we saw last year in SOLIDWORKS 2019. We've seen some really good changes that have made it easier for us to work with large assemblies and large designs. Another good one is large design review edit mode. So this was introduced in SOLIDWORKS 2019, and it was a big shift. That before large design review mode was really only just so that you could open, take a look at, maybe measure. That was it. That was all you could do with those assemblies in large design review mode. With 2019, by being able to say, I would actually like to edit now, we were then given the ability to work with mates, and that included working with magnetic mates. We were able to change configurations of the parts that were in there. And once we had all of our things correct, we were able to then save our assembly so that those changes would be reflected, even if it was opened in resolve mode. So because large design review doesn't load the full model set, it is going to behave much more quickly. And so it's a really nice way to do this review or reorganization or changing a couple components up once you've already got the assembly mostly where you want it. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have a couple of nice new enhancements to this. So previously, we only had access to reference geometry that existed in our top level assembly. So if you're looking at that image on the right side of your screen, we would have only had access to the front, top, right, and origin in assembly 1. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we're actually able to expand those subcomponents, those subassemblies, and we can take advantage of all of their reference geometry. We can take advantage of any points that we've created. So this is really convenient if you have points set up or say coordinate systems set up in those components for mating purposes. You're now able to take advantage of that fully. Another option that we have is the ability to create and edit component patterns. So in SOLIDWORKS 2019, we could insert new components if we wanted to. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we are able to take existing components, and rather than having to insert 3 new ones, we can just create a linear or a circular component pattern. This is a very nice change. You are going to have the ability as well to edit other patterns, but with limited functionality. Only linear and circular have the full functionality there. When you're editing an assembly in large design review mode in 2020, you are also now going to be able to take advantage of keyboard shortcuts. So some of the big ones that I recommend using are Tab. As many of you, I'm sure, know, if you hover over anything with your mouse in SOLIDWORKS and you hit Tab, it's going to hide that body. So you can use this to hide components when you're working in large design review mode. You can also use Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste new components. And when you click on a component from the in-context toolbar, you will now have the ability to say zoom to components. You're always able to switch to resolve mode if you would like to from the large design review mode. It's just a couple of clicks to do so. And when you do, you'll also notice the assembly performance has been improved in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Just a couple of under the hood enhancements, but we're seeing that there are now fewer full rebuilds when adding and editing certain features. And so that just in general means the situations where you would change something and then SOLIDWORKS would think for a couple seconds, there's fewer of those situations in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Working with drawings is something that most SOLIDWORKS users do on a fairly regular basis. And I have yet to talk to anyone who said that making drawings was the highlight of their day. I'm totally waiting for someone to tell me otherwise on that, but that is what I've heard so far. And detailing mode is a really cool new mode that we have access to, where we actually are able to load drawings without loading the full model set. And this is key because when we're working with drawings that have huge models in them, those could be very slow and time-consuming drawings to work with. And this is something I've heard time and time again. And so now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we can take advantage of detailing mode to open these much like large design review edit mode, where we can open it up, we can make some changes, and we aren't having to wait for that entire model set to be loaded or calculated in the background. So this is focused on improving the usability of drawings regardless of the model size. So we have some great tools here. We can be creating dimensions and annotations. We're able to do sketching within the drawing if we would like to do so. And we're able to save or print or export however we need to do. So let's actually take a look at detailing mode. So here we can see when we go to open our drawing, there's actually the detailing mode instead of resolved. So that we're going to select that and open up this drawing. Again, the model is not being loaded, but all of the views and detail is still in here. As we flip between the different drawings, we can see everything is still attached, everything's been created exactly like it was the last time this was saved. We're actually able to move things around. So here we're going to take advantage of the magnetic line and attach our balloon to it. We can also bring in annotations from our design library. So if you have a standard note that you're using, you can bring that in. If this is maybe a standard note that you want to use in a non-standard way, we can adjust the formatting of that note in here. If we switch to another drawing view, or another page, sorry, we might notice this is actually pretty crowded. they're having both of these views on this one page, that's a little bit much. So let's just go ahead. We're going to move a couple of these dimensions around. We're going to copy that second view, and we're creating a new page. There's no problem with doing that. We can create the new page. We can move the page in the order on the bottom of our screen, and we can just paste the drawing view. Easy as that. We can reorganize those dimensions. As I said, when we're working with balloons, we're able to add new ones in here and stick them on the magnetic line, and you can see that everything else is going to adjust accordingly. We are also able to dimension. We're not able to use the model items tool because that would of course require model data. But because we have a scale assigned to our sheet, SOLIDWORKS is able to do dimensioning to edges and vertices. We still have access to the dimension handles so that we can quickly place these things in the correct locations. And we have the dimension palette so that we have full functionality. It's also there in the property manager of our drawings like we have been used to when we're working with SOLIDWORKS fully resolved drawings. It may come up that you say, well, how do I know if I have a command in detailing mode? Simply put, you know if it's grayed out. If it's grayed out, you don't have it. So as you can see here, we're able to use the format painter. We also have access to the revision cloud, revision tables, and revision symbols, all in detailing mode. Once you finish this up, you can go ahead and save it. You're gonna have the option of doing a longer save by resolving or just doing the short save without resolving. And then from there, you can also save as or print to a PDF, to a DWG, to a JPEG, whatever you need to do. So basically, this is a great tool for you to use once you've already got that drawing kind of set up, and now you want to go in and just change some of the details that are already in there or add a little bit more detail to what's in there. Very cool new feature that we've seen in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Detailing mode is not going to save you time when you create the drawing though. That's the thing, it's only really for that adjusting phase. When it comes to actually creating the drawing, that's where we're gonna get to take advantage of two enhancements in SOLIDWORKS 2020. The first is the support for the new graphics architecture. You might remember from SOLIDWORKS 2019 that all of your view commands, so I'm talking your move, I'm talking the pan, the rotate, those were all pushed from the CPU instead to the graphics card. And this provides much better scaling with more powerful hardware. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have that same support in drawings. So again, just moving around those drawings with lots of entities, lots of graphic data going on is now going to be much faster, and it's going to be more smooth. We have also now had an enhancement so that the first view you create when you're creating a drawing from an assembly, that first view will be created faster. If you ever noticed before when you would drag that in from the view palette, it could sometimes take a second or two. It's now going to be faster. What detailing mode is going to do is it will save you time during the reorganization and review phases of creating a drawing. I recommend just taking advantage of it if you notice that a drawing has poor performance. That's something that you as users are, I'm sure, familiar with. You create a drawing, you're starting to work with it, and you think, this isn't really great performance. Well, now that's a perfect opportunity to take advantage of detailing mode. If you ever need to take advantage of any of those other features, like say model items or hole callout, you have the button up on your command manager to just say fully resolve my drawing. Let's get right into it. So you can do that as well on the spot. The other thing is that now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, I just want to make sure I give this the plug it deserves. Markup is available in drawings. Used to be available in components and assemblies. It's now available in drawings. So you can redline the drawing right within SOLIDWORKS. You can type, you can draw. If you have a touch-enabled device, you can do that as well. And you are able to do all of this within detailing mode. So it's a great option when it comes to time to review the drawings. Sorry, stumbling over my words a bit. Okay, let's move on to sketching. Everything in SOLIDWORKS typically starts with a sketch, so it's a pretty critical part of the workflow. And a couple of enhancements that Colin and Claudia talked about during their parts and assemblies webinar a couple weeks ago was the G3 torsion continuity. So I just wanted to review that here. Before, we did not have G3 continuity. We could kind of fake it when we were sketching with a couple workarounds. But now in SOLIDWORKS, out of the box, it's on there, it's on the quick access, the in context toolbar. you've got that G3 continuity to give yourself some really nice curvature transitions when you're working. The other thing, something I'm very excited about, is the enhancement to the redo command. I'm not sure if any of you have found yourself in the situation before where you are maybe a little too liberal with the undo command. You're working in a sketch, you start mashing the undo button, and all of a sudden you find yourself out of the sketch and you can't hit redo. It was grayed out. Well, that is no longer going to be a situation in SOLIDWORKS 2020. The enhancement to the redo command just ensures that it is able to redo back into more functions. So that is going to hopefully save some time, get you a little bit better performance. Now, something in sketching that is going to allow you to really work better in low detail versions is the brand new silhouette entities command. So if you've ever used convert entities, it's a really cool way to select something and then convert that and project it onto your sketch plane. Well, now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have the ability to create outline sketches from bodies. So this is great for if you're working in layouts and things like that. But somewhere that I foresee it being used is with our SOLIDWORKS electrical users or anyone working in a 2D environment who wants to maybe do a 2D layout for, say, an electrical panel. And in that case, they're designing the 3D component in SOLIDWORKS, and then they say, well, I want my 2D footprint. Well, you can now create that sketch, and then you can export it to a DWG or a DXF to actually create that asset. So it's a very cool way that we can now tie the 3D into the 2D a little bit better. Taking a look at it here, we're going to create a sketch on our ground plane, and then it's under convert entities. If you hit the little drop down, there's the silhouette entities option, and then you can actually select either from the tree or from the graphics area. You can select whichever bodies you like, and we're going to leave external silhouette turned on. And this is an example of something I really like about 3D CAD. It's the fact that because it's intelligent, it's able to figure out, well, what are the most external parts? And I'm only going to create the outline from those. If, however, you want to have both that external silhouette as well as some of the internal features, you can just clear the external silhouette option and it will include those as well. This new sketch is going to be associative to our original geometry. What that means is that if we update this part, that sketch is going to change. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to create this layout configuration. So we're going to suppress all of our features. And we can see we actually have this layout going already for our manufacturing floor. Here we can insert the sketch. We can move it around however we want because it's now ready for insertion. If we flip to the default configuration away from the layout, we can see everything else comes back resolved. More graphic data might maybe run a little bit slower, but we can then switch the configuration on the water jet that we've just added in here. And now we have that in there as well. So it's a really good way for you to leverage configurations to have that low detail version so you can really quickly move things around if you need to. Now, what about the situation where a 2D outline isn't enough of a reference? What if you need kind of a full 3D outline? Well, one option would be to create duplicate geometry, or the other is just to always work in the assembly environment, doing the top-down design. Neither of those is necessarily the best, and that's where envelopes came in. They were introduced in SOLIDWORKS 2013, but now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have the option when we create envelopes of using components from different subassemblies. So this is very cool that we can now do this. We can project those as an envelope into whichever subassembly we choose, and we are now able to reference that within the subassembly. So this is a great alternative to working on the top level. It's going to be faster, and it also means that multiple people can be working on the different subassemblies rather than needing to take turns working in the top level. So it's great for collaboration. So that is something that we often hear is that, when people are working with lots of interconnected subassemblies, it can be difficult. The top level, again, it can be slow because you have so many parts and assemblies in there, or people are creating duplicate assemblies, which they then just delete and fix components or things like that. Here, we're going to use the envelope publisher. We can select the component we want to use. We can select the destination assembly, and we just add it. That's all that we have to do at first here. Very simple. Once we've done this, we're then able to actually open up that destination subassembly that we used. And we can see now that it is shown as an envelope for that part that we want to reference. So this is, again, associative. So if that changes in our top level assembly, that change is going to be reflected here. We can add a mate, or we can reference the envelope that we've included here. It's a great way to ensure fit without compromising speed or collaboration. A very nice, convenient tool when you're working in these sorts of situations and you want to create that external reference. Again, the envelope is going to update as well if any changes are made to the top level assembly or to that component that's driving the envelope, so you can still be confident in what's creating here. It's working much the same as any other external reference. It just lets you do that within the subassembly environment. Another great thing here in SOLIDWORKS 2020 is we have much more control of our external references. Envelopes are a great example of external references, and they're key to integrated design. Managing them, however, is very important for your actual large assembly performance. So in SOLIDWORKS 2019, we literally had an all or nothing approach to external references. We could either create them or not create them. Those were the only two options that we had. Whereas now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, this has been significantly expanded. We have the options of saying that the external references can only be made to envelopes, thereby helping our designers remember to use the envelope publisher. And we could also say whether we want them to be in the top level assembly or within only the same subassembly. In order to get the best large assembly performance, your organization will have to decide what's important to you, and at Javelin, we can definitely help with that. Definitely reach out to us if you want to discuss the best practices. But the new options in SOLIDWORKS 2020 will definitely let you enforce those better and make sure that you're getting the best performance without compromising on functionality. Now in 2020, we also have the ability to not force reference documents to save to the current major version. So what I mean by that is, in the past, if you opened an assembly that had previously been saved in SOLIDWORKS 2019 and you went to save it, you would be saving the assembly into a 2020 format as well as any referenced documents. Well, if you uncheck this box that's highlighted here, you will no longer be upgrading those referenced documents, which makes that saving process much faster. Now, one of the things many of you might be saying is that, well, then when we open them, it's going to be slower. And that was previously the case, that when we opened files that were with a previous version of SOLIDWORKS, they could be slower to open. Now in 2020, this process has been optimized for current computer hardware. Before, it would have been slower, but now that we have faster CPUs, now that we have solid state drives, we're able to better open things that have been previously saved in an old version. They're going to open up with a similar speed regardless of the release. So with the reduced time to save files and the reduced time to open files, you're going to see better performance, but you're also going to see fewer requirements to just do batch upgrade tasks. So whether it's batch upgrading in PDM or whether it's using the task scheduler, this is going to be less important than it has been in the past from a performance standpoint. Another really cool thing that, again, Colin and Claudia talked about, but I just wanted to make sure I highlight here, because it takes advantage of some of this increased performance, is flexible components. These are a great way to take advantage of the modern performance, and they use the external references, and you can remap them. And so this is with the brand new make part flexible command. It's a great way to make sure that your assemblies accurately represent the real world version and performance. You can include that dynamic assembly motion, and you don't need to have configurations for each and every position that your assembly might be in. This is great because it also means that you don't have to have discretized positions that you think you might need. You can just move it to that position and see if it's going to work. So, very cool option that is now available in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Next up, let's talk about simulation, because simulation has seen some nice performance improvements. Integrated simulation, having your CAD data and your simulation data tied together so that you don't have to redo your study setup anytime you make a design change, that has for a long time been one of the big benefits of SOLIDWORKS simulation. Now we're seeing some very cool things to just make the general usability increase. So in 2020, we can now just delete any inactive studies that we have without opening them. Before you had to actually load the study, load the results, then you could hit delete. Well, now you can just right click and delete without loading it. We are also now able to better use meshes to get us the results we need. You know, the coarser your mesh, the faster it's going to solve, but the less good your results will be typically. Well, so being able to, run with a high quality or draft mesh more flexibly is going to give you better results faster. We are also able to use distributed coupling now for pin and bolt connectors, which is going to give you more realistic results. And we have thermal functionality for beams. On top of all of this, we're seeing some nice general improvements to the solvers in SOLIDWORKS simulation for multiple load cases. So now, in SOLIDWORKS 2019, there was a bit of this that for multiple load cases in certain situations, it would not repeat the discretization and factorization of the stiffness matrix. It is now going to be faster when you're using a multiple load case with remote loads as well. But just keep in mind, it is not going to be faster if you have the no penetration or virtual wall restraints in there, okay? So let's take a look at what I mean by the mesh quality. So using high quality and draft quality mesh is always a good way to affect the accuracy versus speed. But now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, you have the ability just by a right click to set the quality of the mesh for each body independently. So that's pretty cool. You can say, I'm not concerned about this component. Don't do a high quality mesh. It'll run faster, but you'll get the high quality mesh where you need it. Using the correct element type is also another really good way to maximize the performance in SOLIDWORKS simulation. So using beams when you have long, slender entities is a great way to do this. Previously, we were not able to do this if we had temperature constraints happening in our simulation. So, those would typically run a bit slower. We are now able to fully take advantage of this and apply temperature loads directly to beams or their joints. So this is the same process as any other load and any other entity now. In addition to this, we're now able to use beam elements in thermal studies. So with it, we can apply heat power, radiation, heat flux directly to the beams and then view them in our results. And just like we would do with any other element type, we are able to use the results from those transient or steady state thermal simulations as an input into other studies. So this requires the same mesh to be in both studies. So before we would have had to only run with solid mesh for both studies. That's definitely slower. Now we can see a significant performance benefit by being able to take advantage of those more efficient element types. We're also going to take a look here at why distributed connectors are relevant. So in this situation, we want to use the distributed connection type to attach this bracket. So first we'll look at what happens if we have it set as fixed. We're also going to treat these as a cylindrical face with a virtual wall as well and use the hinge constraint. We can do bolt connectors with rigid loading or with the rigid connection type, which is what we would have seen in the past, but we now have the option of the distributed connection type. And what that means is the nodes that are connected to your bolt and pin elements are going to move independently of each other. Before, they would have all been kind of fixed at fixed distances, so every node on those faces of your bolt interface would have been fixed. They can now move independently, which is definitely going to reduce the artificial stiffness that you're going to see when you're actually working with these. So now let's just go ahead and quickly compare those results for stress here. When we look at this, we're going to see that we actually have about 20% less stress when we use the distributed loading, which is the bottom right-hand side there. We also have fewer artificial stress hotspots, which is again, just because all of those nodes are now able to move independently of each other. So we're not introducing that artificial stiffness. The worst case would be where you see the rigid, where it's absolutely locked them all together with the fixed requirement in the top left-hand corner, and that's introduced a ton of artificial stiffness. So this gives you kind of an idea of why distributed loading is important. It gets you better results that are more realistically representative of what's going on in the real world. So thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to summarize quickly, just in case anyone asks you what you did in school today. So some of the big things that we've seen in SOLIDWORKS 2020. Working with large data sets is key in today's world. And so 2020 has new and enhanced modes to make doing this easier than ever before. We also have more control over our external references. This makes it easier to do in-context design while maintaining performance. Upgrading huge data sets can be time consuming. And so now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have a reduced need to do this. We can work with files from previous versions much more easily. And finally, simulation has better meshing options now that are going to enable you to get your results faster. So thank you for joining me today for this webinar on the top performance improvements in SOLIDWORKS 2020. If you've joined us for any of our other webinars, thank you for doing that as well. If you need to get in touch with us, our contact information is there. Thanks for coming today and have a good one.